In this video, we continue to discuss creating various functions. This time, we're using the for loop to read data from a file, and it just so happens the data that we're going to read will be the test scores, as in a previous example. The Python language also allows you to read the lines in a file without testing for any special condition that signals the end of the file. When we used the while loop, we had to signal to check to see while the line was not an empty string. The loop does not require what they call an initial or a priming read operation, and it automatically stops when the end of the file has been reached. When you simply want to read the lines in a file one after the other, this technique seems to be more simpler or easier and elegant than using the while loop that explicitly rests on an end of the file condition. So the general loop in the for loop that we would use would be for variable end file object. Statement 1, statement 2, statement 3. All statements that are indented would be executed in the for loop. In the general format, variable is the name of the variable and the file object is a variable that references the file object, as you saw in the while loop version. The loop will iterate once for each line that's in that file. The first time the loop iterates, the variable will reference the first line in the file as a string. The second time the loop iterates, the variable will reference the second line in a string as a string, and so forth. It reads the data, keeps a tally, keeps a running sum of the total, and this should be sum, S-U-M, of the total test scores, and writes each test score to an output file as was done in the while loop. Let's take a look at the actual pseudocode. So in this pseudocode, we're still reading the test scores from a file, calculating the average, writing the results to a file, etc., using the read line method. What's different is that we're going to use the for loop. So this looks very similar to the pseudocode we used in the while loop, but this time we'll say for line in file. Line is the variable. N is a control construction as it goes along with the for n. The end file is that the variable object as it relates to the file name. And we still go through the loop, converting the line to a float data type, count each score, keeps a running total or sum of the test scores, writes the test scores to the output file, and we end the loop here. So if you had to compare them side by side, this is what it looks like. So if we look at each line, the for loop version on the left side, for line in file, and you notice within the loop there's 1, 2, 3, 4, about 4 statements that are going to be executed. In the while loop, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the next read inside the loop. So it is a little bit shorter, a little bit more elegant is what they're saying. Nevertheless, everything else is pretty much the same in terms of the pseudocode for having the program to read data from a file, write data to a file, and then do the report for the test scores. Okay, so let's actually look at the Python version of the for loop and see what it's going to look like, how it differs. So you see the pseudocode that says for line in file, convert the line to float, etc., with the 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. This is what it's going to look like. For line in file, convert the line to a float. I just put a print here just to look and see what it's doing. I'll take that out. I don't really need that. So I'll get rid of these extra lines. And see, you have your 4 major lines where you're converting a line to float, doing a tally, keeping a running sum, and writing the results to a file. I don't need this either. Sometimes when I want to troubleshoot, I'll use a print statement. It'll show me exactly what certain variables or objects are at that particular moment doing a particular execution of a program. Okay, so this program has the main function, and then we have the functions to open a file for reading, open a file for writing, and calculating. However, since we have our customize function, we don't need this in this program. We're going to import this into the for loop version. So we'll go ahead on and take this out. We're going to delete line 60 through 97. We've taken out those functions because we already have them stored in the custom file, and we're going to go in here and we're going to do the same thing that we did in a previous example. We're going to use the import command to import customize functions from another module. So we're going to say from last name underscore first name customize functions, import everything. So as we run the for loop version, let's make sure we have the for loop version here. We'll do run. It's going to ask us to enter the name, and if you accidentally misspell the name or forget it or whatever, you have to make sure you know what the file name is. Enter the file name where you wish to write the results. I'll say test results, and I'll just say for loop, and I'll just say output 1. And as soon as that Python prompt comes, that means that something happened. Keep in mind, again, when you're using a write, you're telling the computer to direct the output to a file and not the screen itself, because by default it always wants to display to your monitor, your screen. So here is the file that the program created, the output file. Let's open it up. And we'll drag it up here so we can take a look at it. And here it is. This is what the results would look like. We can expand it out, and this is what you see. Feel free to view this as often as necessary. Don't just try to merely copy or memorize, but understand each statement and its purpose.